It's different in the church environment. We bring our whole selves, and not just our whole selves, but our whole lives to church. So we have access to parts of ourselves that other parts of society, in other parts of society, we don't have that full access. It's also important because we step on the path of people who have been paving the way ahead of us. And I can tell you from my own experience, my congregation polled our first minister of color in 1992. I'm sorry, 1969. And I came of age during that ministry, Reverend David Eaton. And at this memorial service, I said to my mother, if there was a person whose footsteps I would like to walk in, I said it was David Eaton. And she said, be careful what you say. Well, I didn't know at the time, but about 7 years later, I actually had picked up the mantle and was working across congregations to help us to become more diverse. So, you know, the work that I'm doing now is really because of work that was done before I engaged. And church gives us that intergenerational learning experience. We get inspired by people who have gone before us. We listen to their words on most of our Sundays. We bring back those inspirations and experiences. Now, let me make one more point, and then I'm going to ask you a question about that. In our congregations, we are led by ministers and religious professionals who have prepared to do the work of inspiring us, supporting us, and being with us through some of our most private and vulnerable moments. So that kind of supports that access to our full humanity. And then I think also in churches, we are called to close the gap between our values and our lived experiences. And that's an ongoing process. So let me ask you, Reverend Diane, why do you think it's important that we do this work in the church community?
As we began this today, I told Paula that I think we lost our sound. Okay, now you can hear me now. So as we began talking about this, it was a question that I asked Paula, and I thought it was fair that she asked me the same question. And my approach is more from a theological perspective, and it relates directly back to the language in the eighth principle. And I know one of the words that we often stumble on as we engage the eighth principle is accountability. And I think that why we do this work in church is on our best days, and when we ministers do a good job of articulating it, is that we are accountable to something larger than ourselves. That Carlene read the mission statement this morning that says, this is why we are here. This is what we are trying to achieve by being together in community. And I think that it goes back to some of our most historic understandings of our theological perspectives. We are very much a tradition of theological pluralism, so we really can't say that we have a theology that we can collectively gather around and say, this is why we do this. But together, over and over, I come back to two words that I think are common across whatever theological perspective that we're bringing to the conversation. And the two words that I keep coming back to and that I think are deeply rooted in our heritage are love and community. And as we went through our workshop yesterday, I heard those words being used repeatedly. I know Paula used them, and I think I referenced it once, and I heard it from you, those of you who were participating in the workshop yesterday. So love exists in community, in relationship, right? And our heritage has told us that no one is outside the circle of love. No one. And that we experience that love within community and within relationships with each other. So by creating community, and we're not just creating community for ourselves, right? That happens, and it should, but we're creating a certain kind of community. We're creating a beloved community that if you really consider that we are drawing that circle wide, so wide that no one is outside of it because of their identity, because of their belief, because of all the ways that we tend to exclude people, then we are creating the beloved community. So I think as we do this work, we have to be accountable to that higher purpose. So that, for me, is why we do this work in church. And
that's great. Reverend Diane, let me share a few words.
Okay.
This is called On the Brink by Reverend Leslie Takahashi. She says, all that we have ever loved and all that we have ever been stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create, a deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a greater generosity of spirit, a deeper joy in this life we share. And in church, we know that we are not alone.
That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Which kind of leads me to the next question that, as many of you know, maybe not all of you, I have served a great many UU congregations and done consulting work with others. And a question that keeps coming back is like, we love to tell our long history and story of Unitarian and Universalist efforts to remove oppression for Black, Indigenous, people of color across history. We like to tell those stories. And so a question that comes up is, why are we still doing this work? Haven't we done this already?
Well, that comes up. Another question that comes up is, why do we need an eighth principle? Isn't it already in the seven principles? Well, I would say if the seven principles were adequately conveyed, this work of inclusion, that we wouldn't need a conversation about the eighth principle. But we have not finished doing the work. And I think each generation has their work to do in that span of time. It's important to note that this is the 25th anniversary of a 1997 resolution that was passed by our General Assembly to become an anti-racist association. I say 25 years is a long time. That's the coming of age of a whole generation. And the question that I would ask us is, why has it taken us so long to get here? Now, I do have some answers to that, of course. One of the things that I have seen different over these 25 years, I've been at it for about 24, 23 years, is that there's less resistance. Individual people, our system also has less resistance to the change. We're better at centering the voices of people of color, BIPOC, people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and other people who have been historically marginalized in society. We have a lot more publications available to us. Skinner House, our own press, and Beacon Press do a great job of bringing more publications into our system so that we can learn from others' experiences. Technology has changed the way that we pay attention, and especially in these last few years. In fact, I would say it was May 2020 that we all watched the recording as George Floyd's life was ended on the streets in Minnesota. Everyone watched that. And we have a measurable shift in our own association following that incident. We have been working to get the eighth principle adopted for a number of years, and right around the time that happened, our adoptions were in the 20s, right? Somewhere between 24 and 29. We got some more in June, but from June 2020 through June 2021, the adoptions of the eighth principle went from 29 to 117. So I partly attribute that to the role that technology has been playing in what we pay attention to. And George Floyd's death and the pandemic combined had people out in the streets protesting around the country. Really, it happened around the world. And we paid attention. And we started getting more serious. We also had the Widening the Circle of Concern, the work that our Commission on Institutional Change did, which was commissioned by our association following a difficult national incident, right? So we took it more seriously, systemically, and the word accountability plays into this because we said we are making measurable changes, not just wishing for change, but we're holding ourselves accountable for measurable change. And I was on staff for 2 years, and so it was kind of like having a front row seat, and I was really pleasantly surprised at the depth and the rate of change that we saw taking place. So those are some of our responses to why we are still at it. We have not finished the work that we have to do, and I suspect that the next generation will also be engaged in continuing. So how about you? What have you seen over the course of these years?
I think I would echo a lot of what you've already said. I think that the George Floyd murder was really a watershed moment. I mean, a tragic and just horrible watershed moment, but it got our attention. And so I think you're right about that. It brought it home about why we, as Unitarian Universalists, need to do this work, because our values say something different. We say this should not happen in our world, and we're going to get to work on ourselves so that we can be better at creating that beloved community here and in the larger world. And what I keep coming back to, for me, again, theologically, is I'm not Jewish, but the Jewish holy days of Passover are where I go to again and again, because, we do Passover every year. Every year we have to tell the story of being liberated, and that's the way it is with us. The work of liberation is ongoing. It isn't something that we do once and say we're done. So in every generation, we're going to have to continue to do this work, and in every generation, it's going to look different. Which leads me to my next question. I told Paula our biggest challenge was going to be staying on time. So I'm going to move us along to the next question that's related to that, why do we have to keep doing this? And every generation is going to do it and do it differently. So one of the things that really strikes me about your work, Paula, in thinking of our congregations as communities, a community of communities, is the importance of multi-generational community in doing this work as we continue to dismantle systems of oppression and systems of racism. So can you talk about the importance of multi-generational community?
Yes, extremely important. Let me first put it in a larger context. We were talking yesterday about the community of communities, and that was pretty much in a context of today, our times now. But the community itself is intergenerational. You are about to soon celebrate your 75th anniversary as a congregation. I think you said 72 years. My congregation is this year celebrating its 200th anniversary. That didn't happen because of a generation. It's an ongoing process. In fact, I've come more recently to think of the community itself as a living intergenerational entity. We come and go, the community stays. It keeps going, it keeps learning, it keeps evolving and changing. I think we really have to change the way that we look at and think about community, which would lead to a change in the way that we care for community. Our perspectives as individuals change as we go through our lifespan. So the needs and the gifts that are brought from various generations, from children to youth, to people in their 20s and in middle years and senior years, each has a different perspective on the world, different experience. The community benefits when we are engaged across generations so that we are building a healthy and more holistic community itself, a more holistic faith community. How does one generation inform another? In fact, going back to George Floyd's that experience, it was a 17-year-old with a smartphone who made that experience known to the whole world. Each generation brings their perspectives and their skills to the whole. So I think the multi-generational community is really essential. It's not essential for every church to survive or thrive. But I think by and large, it's extremely important to most of our churches. Another thing that is important, our religious education programs are very important. Some of us, that's our introduction to church. That was my introduction, religious education in a UU setting. So I was shaped very much by UU values and principles. And I think that we should really be working to build that and to help it thrive. By the same token, there are things that we offer to young people, I'm thinking like Our Whole Lives, that will serve them the rest of their lives. The multi-generational community, I think, is essential for the longevity of a church community, a faith community. And let me put it back in your way for a moment.
I'm being mindful of time, and what I want to tell you, Paula, is what you can't see here in the sanctuary is the number of children that we have present with us today. So thank you, families, for bringing your children, and thank you, children, for being here and worshiping with us as an intergenerational community. Thank you again, Paula. This weekend has been so rich and so deep, and I believe that you have set us off on a really good direction as we continue to engage our work of widening the circle. And we have put before ourselves some very high ideals and aspirations. May they be so. Correct? Haven't we, Paula? We have.
We have.
I can tell you they are up to it. I have come to know these people as resilient, as caring, as dedicated and committed. So we have placed those high aspirations before us. May it be so, and may we make it so through our living. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 1074, in our teal hymnal, Turn the World Around. We're going to be doing it as written in the hymnal, so it's a really quick intro, none of those fun instrumental bits.